Dear Foxct, please help me, Anthony Wall. I was attached to fake conversations with WFSB, Channel 3 News. Please also help me and help America because you guys attached me to fake conversations with you and with others about the World Trade Center attack. And I found all kinds of things out. Even, in other words, even the silence is leaking now. Before the World Trade Center attack, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, co-defendants of his, Thaddeus Grabowski, and Dominic Lapriata, and LaConch, John LaConch, his daughter, the family of their neighbors have been involved intercities police departments with people from their towns involved with the name Cololo and his educators, and involved with the names O'Brien, their educators, their roles all through their careers before since they were kids. This is proofs. In other words, forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method when there is guilt. The Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as an adult and as a kid. They put them to death through the news to hide that. With police and courts that have been refusing to identify themselves legitimately as collusion/S with ones on all sides of a case next to the World Trade Center right before the attack. And the court itself, it was proven after, had changed the date of timely brought to the court and time stamped, on time, delivered legal papers. They changed the date of it from inside the court, which was proven after. And that was in Manhattan, right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the attack, with people that were also at the spots other next to the World Trade Center before it, as ones also recorded intercities through time. Intelligence families from Connecticut has roles with Washington D.C. and interstates. And note the timing of the airplane problems in the news, and with Washington D.C., Pennsylvania. And the Constitution, how we got into the constitutional, how our fathers got into the Constitutional Convention and the Declaration of Independence, others being and having been communicated for them. They're using what is published, self-valuing what is left out, because it would have brought up, and it shows that all natures of international business. See, I learned at notes at Central Connecticut State University that that anyone who was found out not to, and this is right when the World Trade changed, right before the World Trade Center attack happened too. In other words, years before it, too, with the people involved right next to it, and at the court, and at the building, God forbid. I mean, did not forbid. And in other words, and all this there are collusion/S self-value, not for legitimate takes on logistics and these threats. There are legitimate threats because the identities of each country's name has individuals at locations, areas, and states that are forced not to speak about things that are not, because they're not natural, and because they have those original and still how we are grouped. How there is fake science here and there, yes, and so they're more wrong, but both sides are right, because there's also another side that maintains other things, others are self-blamed for it, including the breaching method itself. We have to, in other words, there are proofs that we need to call it a scientific name, but it is a breaching method itself. In other words, WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others, which is also communications, confirmations, demonstrations of their roles with intelligence families, intercities, on and off campuses with their educators who put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. They made them make fake exceptions. Some way it was their themselves, some way they did that. The difference of that was is used too. And it's with the interbranch switching and forging names, overt criminal enterprises, private ones at the same time. The people going after them in the prisons, hiding live progressions haven't been used, showing how to hide it per use of the same names at and next to body dumping spots associated with other natures of organized crime with their criminals. Since before they were caught, and then after it, torture them to it. Tactically, delusions wrought the whole time. Black pupils who spoke for law, for reason pure, or right. In other words, American history begins with James Madison's plan, and with honesty about all that relative to why and how we're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, and about how he had to come and counter extort because that was the plan he agreed to use and help as our founders. All their speech was measured and maintained by a breaching method was entrenched. This is demonstrated to us by what they declassified and by what nature itself shows us. In other words, in the Constitution unabridged and why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. In other words, especially someone messed up doesn't know that they came through these campuses. Police getting over on that, then there's more and more they're going to self-value readings of statutes and precedents as collusion with all locations /s, certain type of victim /hyper victim. The difference between them at the same time overt criminal enterprises, private ones. They just change and fake whatever. They record things at campuses where they have kids, still kids after 18. You know what I mean? Especially all the racketeering, worse than war crimes methods. There are fact-cheap nature predicate acts roles. There are teachers that know that we never communicated. They were influenced to make a fake exception. In other words, and when there was exception, I made a fake influence them to make an exception. That was influenced to them to use it as a kid, and then when I was an adult, and as the ones with the news. WTNH also has rules with them with the FBI all along Route 175 from the founding locations, right where there's a witch trials place, right next to where there is it is Webb House with no the in front of it, and then they changed it to the Webb Stevens House, and they're putting screened motivations, leaving out what honesty shows us that part of what our founders communicated about how everyone had to pretend they're honest while they're not, and had to exploit, blaming other things other than themselves, the way the breaching method propagated them and gave them means to. In other words, a lot of bad things could have been saved from in New York City, and it wouldn't have been some plan with them sitting there like the same way. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born, with slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. They communicated for us to understand this clear. Instead, we have we have nature debate behind what they said, leaving out what they declassified about this, leaving out what nature declassified about this. While self-valuing criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw readings of statutes, precedents, all kinds of male crime, wild crime, all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slander roles, and the differences of it, with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, interbranch, intelligence tied to them, styles and natures of logic want to speak as and for experience through and as filters, tactical ulteriors from how the identity of hyper-simultaneous. That is not the other species' bodies, and it is not ours, but it is anyway. Where and how it shows us there is a distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature. We are distinct from the other species' bodies. They are distinct, non-distinct from us too, though. They are simultaneously with us in semi-acids and further, per further distinct part that is not them nor us as scientific value, as a distinct nature of hyper-simultaneous nature, which is also non-distinctly ourselves. There is an identity of all space/existence. And then it shows us that all parts of our body are all these individual identities, and they have a semi-nature relationship to the complete identity. And so nature shows this is most probable and practical, where we begin about where everything came. All space/existence already had an identity to an extent to the extent /s that we could discern. And it had wherever we have an extent of its identity that we could discern. It comes with its complete identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that, 3 ways increasing equally. As the identity of 3 identities of 0 that came before 0. But then, as in with, the value of their increasing value too, in demonstration of this, as our own increasing value, but positive or negative too. Like just like your body is relativity to positive and negative right now, you're also a quality of diffusion. But I'm not talking about through the systems here now. I'm talking about the diffusion per its use of positive and negative to communicate with ourselves, to show us what is connected always, true always, or not. What is true always and being used to support motivations, relativity, appreciation too. Like, for example, where there's a breaching method and everyone's motivations were propagated, and roles with that self were forced, sustained. And then modern religious messengers were born. And all that crazy all the way up to against everyone, all the way up to now. And the crazy that speaks about it. And it's recorded having to say it that way because of the nature of themselves. You can't calmly speak with the people, and they know this, and they were showing at locations how they have to do it by making confirmations of rules. Like, for example, at each age of fact should be nature. This is relative to where and how the relativity / hyper-relativity of having had black pupils and whites of eyes, and of having had this with the subject of that breaching method, that torture, extortion, slavery method entrenched sickly distinctly, but also sickly not distinctly, northern colonies and southern colonies. And also the differences of that is also used by the breaching method. That is an identity of hyper sophistication that came from before, but it stayed right through the founding of modern countries. We could observe that and how our founders did not have free speech. We could observe how there is a possession / hyper possession over where and how over self-valued roles, replacing what they communicated about that, which would have liberated the words. In other words, and would have liberated nature with treatments of positive and negative sense and sensibilities, motivations, nature's needs, that would allow to be, let alone to protract, short words with convictions proper, like about the value of the Constitution unabridged, and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them, and why and how nature itself and our founders obligated to us to understand the fact nature breaching method. I am not a lawyer. We're going to refer to it as a predicate acts delivery system method. We're going to force, because this is what nature tells us to do too. It tells us to force who disbelieves that just having black pupils, whites of eyes, we have means to discern there was a human fact nature breaching method. And when we look at history proper, our founders wanted us to communicate about this, but others haven't been communicated for our founders using what they said, exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. Leaving out what they communicated for us to understand about what everyone said was measured and maintained. You have to nature of quality, of relativity. Nature's of relativity to everyone hurting themselves, torturing, killing themselves, and playing games with the differences of it. Mass predicate acts with facts, collusion / yes. Oh, but that's not me. That's my role here. See, that difference is employed by the breaching method too, though. But it was not their fault. That's why with guilt, forgiveness is about not giving up, but not leaving out the breaching method's roles with such. And people try to do this, but there's no way to do it properly entertaining what has been entertained. No one has training boxing, so in other words, they don't know how to deal with legal cases and things like that. So we have to keep it essential and go into a phase where we adapt with this together. And I'll donate. What is it? We donate. It's like a drawing to do the computer. So things are made more complicated, and they're made simple, tactical, ulterior from how nature communicates with such differences, as itself, as that identity that is true always, not denying the slave sequence shift, not denying, self-value, especially, and motivation screening. Because nature is constantly and increasingly showing us an increasingly is value to reason and understanding the scientific value of a human fact nature breaching method being one of the things that slavery was about true always. And nobody wanted the roles with it. And it is a torture, extortion, slavery method. It was a method /S. The /S part is the roles that no one wanted. And the / is the nature no one wanted. But it made exceptions because now you have to do it. When you're dealing with facts now, you're this posture of integrity that never could be, but has to pretend other or be sensed. And that is forced distinctly upon the individual leaders. Because only the individual could defend the order of the finite or finite and uses of the difference of it. Racketeering worse than war crimes. Method and positions. Also designed to keep other things, others, or selves blamed for nature's demonstrations of itself, the breaching method itself. This engineered all postures of integrity as that pseudo integrity that is our subject instantly, where we pay attention to how black people's whites of eyes are hyper evidential, are being projected to us by the identity we know is true always. But people are forcing us into natures of debate that offensively deny us our rights that are too numerous to have to list them. And us or anyone, the nature of the Constitution unabridged, let alone short words, let alone the protraction regarding the revelations and the means out of nowhere that come from the appreciation of the Constitution unabridged. See, that doesn't mean blame criminal foreign influences at countries A through Z, not alone. This breaching method made that self-value, and all counters to itself, needed by everywhere, Instead, only discernible as criminal foreign influence is, or as in the difference of it. That's why there are suits and ties, counters, and exceptions that have left out how the breaching method employed. Because no, it changed their histories and their communications of their founders too, who also didn't have free speech because they had to entertain international companies and natures of industry. I mean, natures of syntax nature. Because more importantly than companies, it's not the company because it's the syntax. So everyone's fighting to use words like extremism, radical, genocide, criminal enterprises. But people don't really use criminal enterprises, they use gangs because the breaching method showed them how to learn about and teach about criminal enterprises while they were already collusion with the predicate acts with facts method. I'm not a lawyer, clearer than day. That black people's white lives replaced. That sustained, rolls with that. And then our founders were born. And again, they don't have free speech. They didn't have free speech. The nature way people that are pretending they have free speech, and they're using their knowledge of good and evil like history. These are the founders. And then James Madison, behind James Madison, and then he was a president. As a founder, he's our main founder. George Washington agreed to help them and to use that plan. But he did say that we should be honest about his extortion, however, because no one had the means to stand behind that plan as integrity, because they would have been sensed. They would not have existed any longer. That's what was set up. That's what our founders communicated for us to understand. In other words, so please, America and countries A through Z, here, Anthony, let's make a temporary thing. We'll jump in and out of like a temporary industry. And we'll do it in a way that everything's, there's a difference between saying transparent. We'll do things better than the free. In other words, we can make easements. Because one of the things where there's a nature of silence or speaking, and the difference of that as sophistication that this breaching method has had. It uses how self-valued roles, blaming other things, others are self. Because we're going to stay how, in other words, we have answers. We know true always. But one of the things when we pay attention to the predicate acts with facts method is other things, others ourselves. Where our blame, where and how nature itself and our founders is showing us to blame the breaching method again, because that's one of the things true always it was about. Someone doesn't take part with that unless there was an international, people had that set up and put it there and forced all the roles with that sustained. People don't naturally put people in their houses as slaves, as they have it in northern colonies and southern, and then our founders were born. Sick, crazy laws against everyone. Therefore, what are witch trials about? You leave out how the witch trials, there's a witch trials place right next to where George Washington had to come to counter-extort with James Madison's plan, founders behind him. Don't forget that. And relative to his extortion, that we have his communications about that and the founders' communications about that replaced and changed too. And the nature of debate contains quality aspects of fact-treatment nature, as criminal insidiousness nature too, with positive treatments or negative treatments. They offensively pretend not to hear and change what people say when they mention predicate acts. In other words, they bring up their names and then they wonder, in other words, these are police that attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and now as an adult. They did this at the same time with the Interbranch and the news and the same names involved At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, other natures of agencies, and services people. In other words, that makes it sound like I don't even know them all. I just know that they're tied to these people. Like, for example, a whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital asked me to take conversations with themselves. And two other times they did that. One of the things they do, the first time there was none at all. And the second time they try to make fake exceptions. And they set me up to be sent there. And they lied about what happened to force me there with people that had been planting evidence on all sides of my house since I was a kid. And they pretended said people were following me. There's a Leahy family that is involved with a whole bunch of people, with a Rick Sanfaglione, with various courts, judges, prosecutors, involved with the foreign and domestic medical families. Also with people named Kerr and people named Perone. And I don't know all the ones tied to them at the corner of at corners of streets, like at the corner of Sostin Highway and Town Line and Town Line Town Line Drive and WTNH with the FBI at Old Weathersfield next to the witch trials place in Webb House. It has rules with people all along Route 175 from Weathersfield and Newington and right to Central Connecticut State University, New Britain. A whole bunch of intelligence people and people from other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the news and their family members too. And names at and next to body dumping spots, even if they're made up. They have rules of wire crime acts and methods self-value. Where and how the breaching method also has that self-value. Where and how the breaching method also used remotely. And uses remotely the country's names through how it has possessions / hyperpossessions over the locations, areas, and states, over their quality aspects of factory nature. In other words, so what we all agree about, there are places, a whole bunch of people with Quinnipiac University involved with child abusers, leaders of the kids, years apart, where there are time use / as to that inclusions with years apart untimely deaths. And time use / brought up at the same time. Intercities, where there's been corruption. One of the ways they cover it up is one of the many ways, is relative to one of the many ways we have to address how all natures of investigations and investigators, originally and still. That's one of the answers what witch trials are about, even if they were made up. Because they have left out what they're about is like tied to the torture, extortion, and slavery of our founders, changing the communications, the nature used to get away on this, all natures of social locations. See, Facebook is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, phishing, and having been phishing for cover-ups, and to get more people to collusions with New Britain Superior Court, Hartford Courts, and Connecticut's District Court, recorded involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their family members and neighbors, and the news at the same time. And their roles with criminal enterprises, with grammar school kids and middle school kids, lying about the behavior of others with judges to make it look like they were in charge. Then the people know their names. If you repeat the name, it makes it look like you had a conversation. It is manifested with this way because the difference of their guilt, the other countries with them, because they have rackets next to the campuses, timed collusion involved, fake motivations too, because the breaching method needs to screen that value, or to sense roles going after the breaching method or matching the breaching method. See, the postures of the sciences as we can observe them as they are actually recorded. It is a non-integrity. It is incapable of defending itself and its logic and nature and uses of names, use of premises, treatments, factual quality aspects of nature and affording to be, let alone to protract. Short words proper with convictions, let alone with guilt, black pupils. See the whites of eyes. We have the same color eyes with different color eyes at the same time demonstrated to us. by this identity that is not us. It is not the other species bodies. I'll tell you one thing though: the other species bodies don't have criminal foreign influences. All the damage to Earth comes through humanity, and we are forcing Earth's a special difference from here. Leaf of Hadith for space nature transfer. This is more probably and is demonstrably what the ancients, demonstrably more probably what the ancients with pantheism was about would have taught. For example, one of the things, at least the Hadith is about a special difference, by understanding, observing how we think properly. In other words, the experts on the sciences like reason, they are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. The same prosecutor is taking down this because forgiveness is because we have to discern where they're all guilt at the same time, including in responses and non-responses to what I said about the World Trade Center predicate acts and the roles, phishing and uses of it roles, where they're saying, well, that's not what the databases say. They know that their databases are fake. This is part of how they are used remotely and pretending other. This breaching method, when you guys were little kids, it sensed who was going to speak right. Because if you speak right and you search what nature shows you and you're honest, there was a breaching method sustained against Native Americans. And while it was sustained, they had to fight. They had to argue with each other or agree with each other about what to do syntactically. And they were both right when they were fighting with each other, like as Native Americans with Native Americans. And there are proofs that before our founders were born, while this was being sustained, they had already taken down a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise that had already leveraged roles that took down a mountain, that took down mountains, one in America and one in Northern Africa. And it made deserts. In other words, or this is a good counterposition, where counterpositions are going to be needed, because when we use the hyperscope of simultaneous things of the revelations that come, like for example, from where and how we have black people's whites of eyes projected to us by the identity that answers questions, not with words, with demonstrations. In other words, we have that left out of the conversation. We have how the breaching method assigned other to be communicated for that. And the roles with that to keep anything but the breaching method blamed for it. Even though a breaching method is one, again, by nature demonstrated, one of the things that is true always. That such was about. So nature is demonstrating that to us. It's not prejudice. In other words, vaccines, I can't teach us things but long. In other words, attend, please. Please do what's right, because they have wire mail crime methods, and they have been changing with what's digitally recorded and hiding it from Judge Napolitano. People on 2 Route Highway are going to record, and off of there, like there's a what's his name? A Brian Bonin. He sought me out one time non-verbally on Route 3, and one time near his house. I believe it's his house near where Maria Vazino lived. And I don't know her too. They're trying to make a fake exception, and I don't know the other people that their names at all. They have something to do with the people I caught with. Involved further with wire crimes and planting evidences on my street from other areas. And they brought up the principal child abuser to me. And there are more roles, intercampuses, intercities, and things like murders and untimely deaths were brought up. And I had neighbors in another city that had been making recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirmed too from before I ever lived there. But I never responded to it. Like, for example, a Rick Cianfaglione and a Kyle Gill have roles with a Leahy family from people from Hartford Hospital and next to Hartford Hospital with the intelligence community, and that and next to Trinity College with the intelligence community. Also with retired mayors and retired police chiefs from Weathersfield, like a police chief Cintron. People on all sides of Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. They have roles with people at Mazzucato Bakery, at the corner of Elm Street and Rocky Hill, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and with various police departments, and the people further with the police and courts switching and forging names, and with their kids of medical offenders in their own. At the same ones at the same times of the names involved were at elderly homes. See, there are whole predicate acts methods and that are involved with where and how everyone's used remotely too. The formal identities of the law, the private, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and a whole bunch of different countries involved with them. Stephen Stocko also sought me out to confess at Central Connecticut State University non-verbally and with Weathersfield Police, Weathersfield and Weathersfield Pizza. He's got roles with wire crimes, acts, and methods with Weathersfield Police that are forging and switching names, and they have child offenders tied to this kid. And all I said was, "May I speak with Maria?" And he had the police call me. He's planting evidences with Maria Vizino, who was also reportedly by Sandra Spada having pretended she had intimate ties with me. I was never intimately tied to Maria Vizino at all. She's got a bunch of people tied to her that pretend they know me. I never even had a conversation with someone I walked by with. In other words, planting evidence. These are people right next to the state judicial branch offices. They have collusion/S with their educators too. I never saw Maria Fazina and a Weathersfield campus in my life. And there are educators of a Stephen Stocko. I never had communications with him at Weathersfield campus in my life. I saw him one time. He was in my math class. In other words, I never had one communication with him in that class. And they planted a Paul Zano and a Ray Glow increasingly to there were proofs that they were influenced to bully him. And see, they wanted me to take part with it because these are people that were constantly planting fake evidences, but it's people from off campuses involved with it too. But sometimes it's themselves. It's because there was also a whole bunch of other different countries involved with them at the same time. And the hyper foreign. And it's relative to how they're getting over on the hyper simultaneous. That which is demonstrating to us its body, where and how it is too. The reason why and how we need more than one name for a verb, for example. While it is the same identity, that is why and how there is the past that we know about. That is value here now. Just like there is the value of seasons, even if they don't make it here, we know their value here now. Is that in the hypernative system? See, but we have ignored this. We have it replaced and had it replaced. And you had that justified to yourselves. There were no excuses. Those excuses are involved with and as criminal insidious natures of positive treatments, negative treatments that are reliant upon criminally foreign influence and tactically solutions wrought. Fact, nature, quality aspects in nature and readings of American history and of the sciences each, or in the law, and of relativity itself. They needed to be pretended theory as collusion/S. I tell it best, so many ways box things. So please, get them on paper, one name and sequence. One of the things that we're doing is between campuses, stacking predicate acts and campuses. Joe Aiello is one of the people recorded involved with a former Mayor Gold. A whole bunch of people have been in. Mayor Gold and his daughter are increasingly involved with people from my grammar school who have roles with body dumping spots. And her she faked communications with me. And she increasingly has roles with various natures of federal criminals before they were caught, including there was NLRB brought in. I believe I put the link to one of the latest Fox Connecticut News. See, Fox Connecticut News has roles with intelligence next to them. And this is what I want to help you guys with. In other words, but you have to help me. And in other words, because it's also obligated. In other words, because there are body dumping spots that were brought up at the same time, murders, and how they play the games of having someone say something and then pretend there was a conversation at locations, not formal locations, with our doctors refusing to respond to me, who spoke fake things in databases, also with the Judge Killian, further with the digital and sexual crimes rules, with the principal upskirt nature. And there are still more on Twitter. They put an upskirt picture, looks just like one of the ones involved with a Phil Cololo and others involved with on my street, further with the Bob Chase. Bob Chase has roles with ongoing predicate acts and people involved with federal evidences crimes on my street with him from Whiting Forensics. Also, a Joshua Julian is one of them. Also, the principal upskirt nature said that also there's a Mike Levine. People with the name, a whole bunch of people from Central Connecticut State University with a whole bunch of different countries and military, foreign and domestic. Something to do with their roles with Ballycrest Street and Weathersfield, Connecticut, has roles with the criminal enterprises, private ones, and that former FBI director, Robert Luskin, and people with a Kevin Harris and his mother and their family members. People tied to a Kevin Harris with some judges and prosecutors involved with the doctors personally and professionally, foreign and domestic ones. They're forging and switching names of doctors. They're preventing writing. They're preventing a response to me. They pretended to others through the mail that we had communications ever. A Leahy family. Whole bunch of people with a Leahy involved with multiple courts. Were involved with, as the people involved with the World Trade Center attack, ones who were involved with them with the wire crime acts and methods, with the Weathersfield police refusing to identify themselves, as ones involved with a whole bunch of different ways of intelligence families at Central Connecticut State University through time since they were little kids. They're repeating fake things, having other people say things when people walk by, so then pretend they know them. The differences of our side guilty with that, some other sides, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, names at body dumping spots next to them. That was his use too, remotely criminally foreign influence. They have more teachers of the schools involved with sequence shifting because they're trying to pretend they had conversations with me in the past that never were, and they've been planting predicate acts with the news, and the Whiting Forensics has been placing restraining orders on people with all courts. I've been doing this because they have rules with cover-ups of their rules with all kinds of predicate acts methods with investigators. They also have people, this is relative to how people say switching things. They're recording themselves, sometimes saying this, sometimes saying that, because all natures of investigators are being and have been used remotely. More and more, they're recording this. A whole bunch of people from Weathersfield and at New Britain, as ones involved with rackets on all sides of New Britain's Central Connecticut State University. They also have roles with intelligence families, foreign and domestic, at the spots next to Hartford Hospital, and people associated with like a Demorals Market that used to be there, and where it is now, and people involved with involved with the World Trade Center attack too, and people with the name Scalora involved with police forging and switching names, predicate acts on my street. Heather Hansen had roles with at least 3 home break-ins in my area with them. Rolls through, in other words. And these are police that know I recorded this. That's why they hid it from my parents. I don't know what they did. But in other words, this is also on and off class campuses how I recorded it. Then they had to make cover-ups, so then they never spoke with me. Then now I'm an adult. They had to pretend they spoke with me in the past, and they attached me to fake conversations with them in the future. Has something to do with their roles intercities with Central Connecticut State University, has people that stuck fake things in databases from other classes, and they try to make fake exceptions of me knowing people. They're putting fake passions and emotions, and the differences of them are overt criminal enterprises, private ones at the same time. And people with the campuses and their family members, they all run in to hide live progressions, and it leaves chaos where you have investigators have to do things about things. In other words, and that makes people just make blind say do something, and they say, oh, well, that's why we're just doing that because these are the ones writing the laws, reading about crimes and things as collusions with the crime scenes, increasingly not just against the innocent, even against the killers to keep their mouth shut about their roles with the names next to the body double spots before they were caught. Their roles with the forcing the principal child abuser before he was caught by collusion / like on a mass scale, demonstrably, but just against me. They put the charge of harassment, and they never let me get to communicate. I keep putting all these different messages and confessions and saying fake things after I caught them recorded before it was brought up to the campus to me, the principal child upskirt nature before they was caught. In other words, and I never got the caught. And then they said, so now they have a record. There was a bunch of phone calls, and they pretended it was my fault. I never even got to communicate with one person. All they did was start covering live progressions, and I still haven't been responded to about his confessions and the rest of the things worse than they put him in jail for that are involved with it. And it has something to do too with Knott Street and Walker Hill, that corner, involved with I don't know those people there at the house involved with the Espada family. They tried to make a fake exception for their roles with probate court judges, but at the same time, though they're other countries, at the same time worse. See, but everyone wants to be but everyone's won't get on paper. So in other words, that's where they're being evil, and in other words, that's where I'm having to bring up the evil. No one's allowing themselves to be shown as it was. Victim predator, people I never try to contact me, and their boyfriends. These are people there are a bunch of people that there are a bunch of girlfriends with boyfriends that are connected who have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders together intercities as the ones involved with wire crimes, planting evidence on my street still. And girls I don't even know. The intelligence community and the interbranch are kept criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, certain type of victim / hyper victim since they were kids, child abused, with reasons words replaced, with nature's words replaced, black pupils. Like this league we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time for that identity of everything at once, all space / existence. The difference between space and existence. Its identity is discernible. It has the participle natures grouped. In other words, the reason we need participle natures to appreciate them, distinctly from the verb, distinctly from the predicate act, distinctly from how and why. These additional names are all about the hyper-additional nature that is simultaneously greater than and more finite than each identity of value / value progression. All exceptions and exception nature are generating demonstration of the same thing. Boxing. Thank you.